Cryptid Comics.
All right, so welcome everyone to the after show. Where we don't add audio effects in post, we do it with our mouths, the old-fashioned way. So, because I was out of town last weekend and went to Kansas City for Planet Comic-Con, I thought it would be cool for us to talk a little bit about that because it is comic book related, so it's kind of in our wheelhouse, and also that gives us a chance to kind of touch base on that since we haven't really. So, the first, and I went with my little sister, which because of the pandemic, it had been I think 3 years since we'd been to a con in Kansas City. She lives there, so that's the most convenient one for us to go to. But yeah, we were going to St. Louis before that, which I wish we still did because it's a lot less driving for me. But yeah, for those who don't know, St. Louis is like 2 hours from where I live, and Kansas City is like 6. So it's like going to Chicago, basically.
A lot further for me.
The first, yeah, oh yeah, it's a heck of a lot further for you. But I haven't done a con in a long time, and I was really excited, especially about some of the DC and Marvel books that I was able to get signed and creators that I got to talk to. So I just wanted to, kind of share some of that with our audience, and hopefully it's interesting. So Cullen Bunn is the first writer that I talked to, and he did the entire run of Sinestro during the New 52 for DC Comics. He also wrote Green Lantern Corps, The Lost Army, which was about like John Stewart and I believe Guy Gardner being lost in time. And he also wrote, this is the most controversial one, does that look like Lobo to you?
That's Lobo?
That is
Wow.
Lobo during New 52. So he wrote this volume of Lobo. Actually, I think the whole run as well, which was a complete reinvention of the character from the ground up, which is, for whatever reason, what they decided to do for New 52.
I was going to say, did that character need to be reinvented?
No. No, and it was very poorly received by fans. However, the book in and of itself is interesting as its own thing. It just would have been better if the character wasn't named Lobo, because they had him, like, I think, kill the existing Lobo and be like, oh, that guy you knew, he was a clone, I'm the real Lobo. And then this guy comes out. So they did one of those. But as you can see, it is, I don't know if you can see it is signed there. But big mistake number one that I made. I totally forgot about this, but Cullen Bunn also wrote one 6-issue trade of Aquaman that I did not bring and did not get signed. So I got everything that I have by him signed except Aquaman. And so, first of all, one of the reasons it's most interesting to talk about him is because he had nobody at his table and he no longer works for DC. So he immediately launched into some sort of like inside baseball stuff about like working at the company and what that was actually like during that period. And it was very negative. I was very surprised at what he said. But when I brought up Lobo, he was like, yeah, so that was an assignment that I was given that I sort of knew wasn't going to be well received by fans, but I made the best of it. And I like that character. And he's like, what did they end up doing with him? Did they kill him off? And I'm like, yeah, they killed him off. There was an issue of, I think, Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps where you see his head in a jar, and that was all you got as a conclusion for that New 52 character. So he's gone. His head's been cut off. And now we're back to the bow that we all know. But he also said his Green Lantern Corps run was intended to be 18 issues long, so a 3-trade arc, not just one trade. And his Sinestro run was going to tie into that, and he had all these plans for how he was going to develop his corner of the Green Lantern universe. Basically, he's like, so I'm writing villain characters, but my perspective is that they don't think they're evil. So from Sinestro's point of view, he's bringing peace to the universe. Like, he really is bringing order, more order than the Green Lanterns are. So he's like, that was my angle on that book. And he's like, actually, I plan to have the Sinestro Corps completely take over for the Green Lantern Corps while the Corps was like trapped in time. I was going to have them like battle up through time for like 3 arcs. And he's like, so what happened was there was a terrible, horrible person working at the top of DC Comics at the time. And I found out that Sinestro was canceled and I was off Green Lantern Corps because one of the other writers came to me. And it's somebody that's a pretty big name, Tom Taylor. And he's like, so this guy comes to me and he's like, hey, DC gave me this pitch for a Green Lantern book. And they were like, we want the Green Lanterns to be like battling up through time and then sort of battle the Sinestro Corps for, dominion of the universe. And then eventually the Green Lantern Corps will win. And Cullen Bunn is like, yeah, that's my story pitch. So his story pitch, the editor gave it to another writer and had them write it. And that was how he found out he was no longer writing the book, which is really sucky. So yeah, that he was very frank about like working there. And I know who the 3 creative leads were at DC at the time. So I basically narrowed it down to the one guy that I know it is. And he's since been fired from DC. So that makes sense to me. But yeah, he was very much like, I love these characters. I love the DC universe. But he also said that once the Rebirth era started in 2016, that editorial was saying, we don't want you to worry about continuity. Just write cool stories. Don't worry about what people are doing in other books. It doesn't matter if it lines up. Just write exciting stuff. And I guess Bunn pushed back really hard on that, and they fired him. So that was how he ended his career with DC.
Yikes.
So what he's been doing since is writing comics that I guess are about cryptids, which are, basically all the American myths we have about like monsters in various regions of the country. The one we have down here is the Big Muddy Monster, and there are also Mothman sightings down here. If you live in the Northwest, yeah, exactly, Mothman. Well, you've seen that Richard Gere movie, right, with the Mothman or whatever, where he like comes and tells people about disasters, and then but you can't do anything to prevent it. Like the disaster is still going to happen. The Mothman prophecies, I think that's what
something like that.
Anyway, that's based on a real urban legend, in the U.S.
Is it the one where he's like, yeah, and if you don't give me what I want, there'll be more things like that, cloth related.
That's exactly the one. Yes, that episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force is what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
So that's yeah. So he's so I guess he's like pivoted his career into like indie comics, and he's been writing about just making comics based on American monster myths and stuff. So he had a whole panel where he was talking about that, and Laurel and I went to it, and that was really cool because we just got to hear him talk about different monsters and stories that have been passed down. And
is that similar to Fables?
Seem like they were the what?
Is that similar to Fables?
No, because Fables is more based in like fairy tale folklore, and this is more like word of mouth folklore of like, the Wendigo and the Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, and
so more like Grimm's fairy tales than
exactly
regular.
Yeah.
Okay.
More stuff that people spread through word of mouth and that some people believe is real, but that, he'll just take some sort of legend like that and study it and then like blow it up into a comic book story. So I actually got to speak with him a little bit because my local comic store owner, Mike he made a comic book about the Big Muddy Monster, which is something that apparently hangs out at the Big Muddy River in Murfreesboro. So I guess that's like a local legend that they have. But the story goes that there was this couple, and they were both cheating on their spouses in a car out in the middle of nowhere in Murfreesboro. And this is like the 1970s or something. And some creature came out, and it was all woolly and muddy and gross, and it let out some blood-curdling scream. And they were so terrified that they went to the police and they exposed their affair in order to let the police know that this thing was out there. So that's the argument that people use when they're like, well, it must be real, because otherwise these people wouldn't have exposed that they were cheating on their spouses. And so I got to actually talk at the panel. I wasn't on the panel, but they asked like, do you have local legends about monsters in your area? And I was like, oh yeah, I have one, so that was kind of cool. He was very like approachable, and they were also drinking a lot during their panel, so they were getting like really goofy. It was,
Wow.
and I mean, it was like 11 o'clock in the morning too. So I was just like, wow. I guess they have a podcast called like Comics, Cryptids, and Coffins or something like that.
Hmm.
And so I don't know, but he was really interesting just because he was very much like, yes, I worked at DC. It was a rough period, and I'm glad I don't work there anymore. And I was like, wow, that sucks. And
Yeah.
but he is the only person that signed my stuff for free, because he
Hmm.
was like, honestly, I'm just happy that somebody appreciated my work there during that time, because I didn't feel it from management. So he's like, I'm glad that there are fans out there that liked it, and like it makes me happy that you brought these books in. So I was like, oh,
Oh,
cool.
that's
So
cool.
he was like, yeah, I'm not gonna charge you at all. So yeah, that was really neat. Um, and let's see what else we ran into. So we didn't have a lot of money, is one thing when we went in. So we had to really pick and choose kind of where we went. But another really big name guy is David Mack that we ran into, and he did these two trades of Daredevil. This one he penciled, and I use penciled loosely because it's like collage and watercolor type stuff. So it's not like traditional art. So he does all of his own, like, I don't know if you can see that very well or not, but there's actual like lace used for collage on the border there, and then
Hmm.
he painted in the middle. So it's very like mixed media art. But he actually wrote this volume of Daredevil, and the reason this is significant is because that right there is Echo. And so
Okay.
she obviously, this is her first appearance. And so I got to I'm trying to find like pages of her. There she is like doing ballet, but like the Kingpin is in there earlier, sort of having her watch fight movies and learn moves by memory by just watching stuff. And so David Mack co-created this character along with Jose Quesada, who did the pencils for that volume.
And the other half of
And
Jose
so,
Quesada.
yeah, exactly. And the other, well, that's why they used his name in that
Yeah,
movie.
exactly.
In
So is
fact,
that
that in the movie they say Mac, Miller, Bendis. Those are all my
okay.
fighters. Well, David Mack is the Mac that
Yeah.
they're referring to in that movie. So I was intimidated to talk to this guy because he's a big deal. He created Jessica or co-created Jessica Jones, has done a ton of covers for that series, and he's really a big deal. Laurel goes up and she's like, so now that Echo was in Hawkeye, do you get royalties? And he's like, well, that's a very good question, because Disney came to my house and I signed a contract and I'm supposed to be getting royalties, but I haven't seen a check yet. And we were just like,
Jeez.
oh, sorry.
Yikes.
She was kind of going like, oh, this should be really good for you, right? And he
Yeah.
was just like, yeah, we'll see. And I was like, oh
Wow.
wow, okay. so so we were 2 for 2 on somebody from DC and somebody from Marvel that were like, yeah, this isn't as prestigious as you think it
Yikes.
is. you know.
So does that mean that trade in your hand that has his signature, for first appearance of Echo, even though it's not,
Mm-hmm.
wrapped and in mint condition, is that still, could you sell that on like on eBay for, a couple hundred or thousand
It would
now?
be, I don't think it would be worth 1,000. But it, because it's not a floppy issue, I don't think
Hmm.
getting these signed they're worth as much, just because they're trades, and trades are mass produced much more than
Ah,
the
true.
individual issues are. But it is worth more than if it wasn't signed at all. So, and a lot
Gotcha.
of times getting stuff signed is just kind of like the in to get to talk to the person in the
Yeah.
industry and actually have like a person to person interface with them. So that's one of the reasons that I get, so excited about it. But
Hmm.
the Cullen Bunn stuff, I don't know necessarily if that's ever going to be worth anything. I did get the first volume of Sinestro just to be, sure, because he wrote, I think all what, how many do I have on the shelf over there? Like 4 or 5 volumes. I think he wrote them all. Um, yeah, but I'm not one of those people that's like, here's a stack of 10 things, sign all of them, because I hate that when there's somebody like it in line in front of you and they're like, here, and they're like, we charge $10 after the first 3, and they're like, yeah, that's fine, sign all 50 of these. I'm
You'll
gonna
be
flip
here
them
for the next
online.
3 hours.
Right. Like, and they're just like, okay, give
Wow.
me the money. Like, I'll do it. Um, so yeah, so that was another kind of interesting discussion. We did not get to go to a panel with David Mack because I think that was on Friday. And it was also at the same, he had another one this day, but it was the same time as the 3 Star Trek panels, or well,
Oh,
2 Star Trek panels, really. But so we had to pick basically, do we want to see
yeah.
Jonathan Frakes or do we want to see David Mack? So we ended up going with Jonathan Frakes. But that's not the only stuff that I got signed. I guess I could go ahead and show the rest of it. So Robin, Son of Batman is written and penciled by Pat Gleason. I think you can see that at the bottom there. Patrick Gleason. He is one of my favorite creators. This is one of the only things I haven't gotten signed by him yet. He did an Aquaman run in like the early 2000s, but he's a really good artist and he really loves Damian Wayne. He's done a lot with that character. So it was cool to talk with him about Robin. He's actually since moved to Marvel and he pencils Spider-Man now. So he in fact that's why he left DC, because Marvel came to him and they were like, "Hey, you've got some heat behind you. We'll give you a nice contract if you want to come and we'll let you pencil basically our flagship title." And he was
Hmm.
like, "Okay, that's that sounds
Yeah.
good." So but it was cool. He was like, "Oh, I'm always glad whenever Robin shows up because I'm that's one of my favorite characters." And he's like, "It was hard to leave DC. I worked there for a long time, and it was really positive experience." And
Hmm.
so it was interesting because his experience was totally
Yeah.
different from this writer that I talked to, and this was around the same time as
Hmm.
like Sinestro and Lobo and all that were being published. So I maybe because he was more of a name, he was getting more respect. I don't know, but it was cool to chat with him, and I didn't get into like nitty gritty of art stuff too much, although I did get to ask him about like the rotating penciler duties, which I know is something we've talked about a lot when you go from like one issue to another and it changes
Hmm.
pencilers and he was like, honestly, he was like, I agree with you. I think it sucks and it breaks up the flow of a story. But he's like, honestly, with the schedules that they have everybody on, it's just unrealistic for one person to be able to do like 6 or 7 consecutive issues in a row. He's like, it's too much work to put out in too short of a time. And so
Hmm.
we have to have guest pencilers come in and break it up because the schedules are just too, like, the deadlines are too crazy. So he was like, but he's like, from an art standpoint, I agree with you. And I think that we should never do that. But from like a business standpoint, I understand why DC and Marvel do that. So I was like, all
Sure.
right, like I kind of get that. But so yeah, it was cool talking to them. The other people that I got stuff signed by were Amanda Connor and Jimmy Palmiotti, who both wrote this trade of Starfire, which is one of her only solo series, I think. And they also have a very long and critically acclaimed run on Harley Quinn
Hmm.
that began in New 52, ran the length of that era, continued into Rebirth, and I don't know how many trades they had there as well, but it was, I mean, what I think well over 50 issues. And
Wow.
Connor is the cover artist, and she's done some interiors, but mainly is just the cover artist. But she and Jimmy Palmiotti are married, and so they were sitting at a table next to each other. And also, Palmiotti did the inks on that David Mack Daredevil with Echo, so I had him sign
Hmm.
that as well. So I got several books where I got like multiple signatures on them
That's
because
cool.
there were multiple creatives involved. So that was really neat. They had a much longer line than the other people because I think because of Harley and that book being really having taken off. And really, like, the animated series version of Harley Quinn is very close to what they did in the comics. It's,
Hmm.
I would say, the animated series version is much crasser to get that TVMA rating, but it's tonally it's similar. So I think that's a lot of where their fan base is coming from. But they still work for DC. There was a character that I asked her about that she created named Atlee, and she was like, yeah, nobody seems to want to use her but me. I don't know why. And, you know, but I really didn't get to speak to them long because it was kind of like, we gotta get everything
Yeah.
through. So, yeah, but that was fun. So one of the best panels that we went to was we had 2 hours of Star Trek, basically. So I don't know if we brought it up in the episode, but we're bringing up Star Trek now. So William Shatner was on the stage first, and then after him was Jonathan Frakes. And so William Shatner, first of all, was late for his panel because he was really winded walking around the convention center, and I guess he couldn't get there on time. I don't know. That's what he said. I have a feeling it was that the photo ops and signatures went too long, and that's probably why he was late. But we only got like 40 minutes out of him. But what they usually do is they'll speak for 30 minutes and then they'll go into like a Q&A session with the audience.
Hmm.
But Shatner was like, I've talked a lot before. What do you guys want to talk about? Somebody come up and ask me a question. And they just did like Q&A for the whole time. So he told somebody asked him what it was like working with DeForest Kelley. And this was by far the most fun story that he told when he was there. So this is secondhand, so hopefully I get it right. But he's like, so DeForest Kelley was a Southern gentleman, and he was really shy, and he didn't like to socialize a lot outside of our, when we weren't filming and things like that. He would be on set when he was needed, and otherwise he'd be home with his wife, and didn't want anything to do with the show business lifestyle. And he's like, so knowing, but one of his true joys in life was his morning bagel. Whenever he would come in the morning, he would get a big smile on his face when that bagel popped out of the toaster. And he's like, so I looked over at Leonard and I was like, Leonard, watch this. And so DeForest had just been talking to Bill Shatner, as he calls himself,
Hmm.
going, I think my memory is going, and I'm just getting older, and I think it's going away. And William Shatner's like, no, you're fine, D. Everything's gonna be fine. So Kelly puts the bagel in the toaster and then walks away for a second. And so what does William Shatner do? He goes and takes the bagel out while allowing it to still be, toasting, and
Hmm.
then puts it in his pocket real quick of his jacket. And so he's like, and I see D, and he walks back over, and the toaster pops up, and air comes out. And he starts swearing under his breath. And he's like, and then he grabs another bagel and he puts it in there, and he's like, he's swearing about like his gosh darned memory and all this stuff, and he throws a couple more bagel slices in there, and then he's like, and then he walks away again to go to talk to somebody else. And I was like, Leonard, watch this. And so then he takes the bagels out again, but DeForest Kelley starts coming back too fast, so he didn't have anywhere to put them except in his mouth. So William
Oh.
Shatner is standing there with a mouthful of bagel, and and they pop up again, and there's nothing there. And so DeForest Kelley starts swearing again, and then he looks over and he sees William Shatner with his mouth all puffed out, and he goes, "You son of a bee!" And that's he's like, that's what it was like working with DeForest Kelley. And I'm like,
Wow.
that sounds more like what it was like working with you, but
Yeah.
but it was very funny.
Huh.
So I guess they played pranks on each other on the set of Star Trek all the time, and this was
Hmm.
on one of the movies, he was talking about. But
Yeah.
he's like, no, I made him think he really was having memory problems, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. So he did talk about going to space a little bit too, and that that was very interesting because first of all, he was like, I'm not qualified and I'm terrified, but no one will let me live it down if Captain Kirk says no to going to space.
Yeah.
So I was like, fine, I have to do it. He was like, everybody was telling me you have to do it, and I'm just like, I don't think. He's like, I'm terrified, and they were telling me there was some tank on the side of the engine, and he's like, what's that? And the guy's like, oh, that's hydrogen. And he's like, I don't know if you guys know anything about the Hindenburg, but hydrogen is what made it explode. And so he's just like losing it up there. But he went up, and he said it was interesting because it made him see the earth as, he's like, I looked down and I saw life, and I looked up at space and I saw death. And I thought, how precious is this place that we live, and we have to take care of it. And also, I can't wait to get back there because I guess he was really afraid for
Yeah.
like while he was up in the, you know, and I think they just went up into orbit and then came back down. It wasn't like a long thing,
Just a
but
joyride.
he ended, yeah, exactly. But he ended on sort of like an environmentalist note, you know, and of course he talked about his horses and all those things because um I'm sure you're aware that Captain Kirk, the character, and William Shatner, the person, have a lot in common as far as like where they're from, what their interests are. You know, a lot of those lines are kind of blurred.
Yeah.
So, his panel was interesting. It was pretty good. Then we had Jonathan Frakes, who you have started the third season of Star Trek Picard, have you not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I
Seen
have
him quite
not.
a bit in it.
And Frakes walks out onto stage, and the first thing he says on the mic is, "So how about that secret love child of Jean-Luc Picard and Beverly Crusher, everybody?" And I was like, "No, I don't know these things." And he proceeded to give a few more spoilers. He's like, "So what do we expect in the next episode? Do we expect to see, I don't know, maybe LeVar Burton, Geordie LaForge?" And he's like, "Don't worry, I signed all those non-disclaimer agreements, but I don't care." And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, he's
Well,
just
maybe you
going up
don't,
there
but we
spoiling."
do.
I was like, "I care." So,
Well, it's funny
yeah,
too, because like on the internet, like, because spoilers all over, I've been trying to
yes,
avoid those. But even I think right after the first the first episode aired, or maybe right before, there was a picture of LeVar Burton and his daughter, and it was like he and
yeah,
his real life daughter are playing characters on Picard, and as LeVar, as Geordie LaForge's actual daughter. So again,
yeah,
spoiler, but it was
mhm,
like kind of a cool moment. Well, you actually don't see LeVar, reprise his role for, it's like 5 episodes, 6. You don't see him
oh
for quite a
wow,
while,
okay,
while into the series. So that was kind of interesting to like spoil it before the show even came out, and then we don't even see him for
yeah.
a while. So, and then yeah, for Frakes to spoil that again, geez.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, he just came out with it. And so it's really interesting getting his perspective on the Trek shows because I didn't realize this, but he has directed episodes of TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Picard. I don't know that he's done Strange New Worlds yet. And then he starred in Lower Decks in multiple episodes as well. So he's basically not stopped being associated with the franchise for the entire run because
Yeah.
he comes in behind the camera. And so it was really interesting hearing him talk about that experience. And he talked about Discovery a little bit, where he was like, it's such a shame that that show got canceled. They're such lovely people. I had a great time with that cast and crew. And he's like, can't we all agree that it's a shame that they're being canceled? And there were absolute crickets in the auditorium
Oh,
after he said that. No one made a noise. And he was like, oh, maybe not. And then he's like, what about the new season of Strange New Worlds? And they're going to have a crossover with Lower Decks. And then everybody cheered. So I think we know which direction the fandom is leaning, and it's
wow.
not towards Discovery. Yeah, no reaction for Discovery whatsoever. So,
Yikes.
um, yeah, but he said that as he directs, he a lot of times actors will get nervous, especially in the makeup and stuff. They get self conscious about it, and so what he does to relax them is he sings show tunes from like old Broadway musicals, just like sitting in his director's chair, and then
Of
sees
course
how
he
many people
does.
know them and will join in with him. And yes, he really plays the trombone and
Hmm.
um and all of that. And so he was singing show tunes up on stage. And there was this kid that came up that was like, I play the trombone, and I was just wondering, like, do you do that in real life? And he was like, oh, well, how's your embouchure? And on the trombone. And the kid didn't know what that word meant. And he's like,
Aw.
I don't actually believe you that you play the trombone if you don't know what an embouchure is. And I was like, oh wow. And is it something to do with like the space between your mouth and the mouthpiece?
So
Or
it's your facial muscles that have to hold themselves a certain way to get your lips to vibrate to make the sound in the mouthpiece. So your embouchure is your
okay.
like your facial muscles that control that sound. So being able to go
Yeah.
that kind of like sound into a mouthpiece, and then when it goes into the actual instrument, it comes out sounding, you know,
Mhm.
a lot like music and less like flatulence, which it sounds like when you don't have a mouthpiece on.
Yeah. So he definitely does play the trombone. I guess he's brought it to sets before and played just in the background. So that sort of caricature of him on Lower Decks where he's like, let's go to warp factor 5, 6, 7, 8, and he's like doing all the jazz
Oh,
stuff.
the jazz.
That's not far off from how he is as a real person, I don't think. So
That's fun.
but the most exciting part of the panel was he's singing show tunes and he starts walking back behind the curtain, and we just hear him singing like farther and farther away, and then he comes out the other side and Brent Spiner is with him also singing along. And so what Brent Spiner did, so Brent Spiner was not supposed to be there that day at all. Like he
Oh,
had no
wow.
panels, he wasn't doing signings, he was only going to be there Friday. So that was a big deal because we were not expecting to see him. But he yeah, he came out and for the next 5 minutes only answered questions in a Patrick Stewart impression. And
Wow.
and then like questions from Frakes to him. Who'd be like, and what do you think of this? And you know, Spiner would be like, make it so. And then Jonathan Frakes is like, who are you supposed to be? And he goes, Sir Ian McKellen. I'm like, oh my God.
Wow.
So that was very entertaining. But the craziest thing about it all was the reason Spiner was there was they're billing this new version of Cameo they're doing where Frakes is like, I'm tired of doing Cameo, which is the service where they get on and people pay them to give birthday wishes to somebody or something like that. It's a
Okay.
way that celebrities can make money. He's like, I'm sick of it. I hate using Zoom. We use it for auditions. We use it for everything in the film industry. I'm tired of it. I want to see people in person. So Brent and I have gotten together and formed this organization where we drive around the country and we will go to your house and give you a birthday wish instead of doing it over Zoom because I'm
Wow.
tired of talking to people on my computer. And I was like, are they for real? And there was like a website and an email address and all this stuff. And it's apparently a legit thing where they're just going to drive around the US and like wish people happy birthdays for money. So
Wow.
I don't know how much it is, but yeah, that was very interesting to hear him talk about that. So he also Frakes talks very, very fast, which is a lot like Riker, of course, his character, but he talked to the sign language translator at one point and he was like, dear woman, I hope that there's someone coming in to tag you out halfway through this panel because I talk very, very fast and I know it's got to be difficult for you to keep up with me. And she's like, there's somebody else coming on. And he's like, oh, thank God. Okay. And so, I mean, he was just like hamming it up the whole time.
Wow.
And it's weird because he doesn't look like he's aged as much as the rest of the cast. Like he has some gray hair and stuff, but like he still looks like Commander Riker, you know? I mean, it's crazy. So I don't know. That was a lot of fun seeing the Star Trek people. I mean, they couldn't talk a whole lot about upcoming projects because
Yeah.
they're secret. But yeah, he's directed all the shows and something I didn't think about with Discovery ending was those people losing their jobs. Now, I'm sure Sonequa Martin Green is gonna, land on her feet. I think she's a big enough name that she'll find other roles and stuff. But
Yeah. And Doug Jones, he's been
yeah,
in
yeah,
a lot of stuff
exactly. Like
already. And
like I think most of them are gonna be just fine. But yeah, it was interesting hearing about it kind of more from the crew perspective than like the fan perspective. So
yeah, they probably have a lot of fun making those episodes and all of that stuff. But
right.
it's like you have to think about it from all the different perspectives. Like, should we keep a show on
Mm-hmm.
if it's not making money? Well, no, that's not good business. But at the
Yeah.
same time, like, yeah, you want to keep people employed and keep them together if you can. But you know, if the show's not making money and the fans don't like it, then, you know, unless there's a
Yeah.
benefactor who's rolling it, like they've done that with some movies, right? Where the actor's so famous and has so much money that they're like, we're going to produce this movie. I'm going to pay for it. I don't even care how much money it makes. I just want to put it out there and I'll watch it and I'll be the only one. Like Jack Black, I think, did that, and a couple others. So, but Discovery's not one of those.
Margot Robbie did that with the Harley Quinn movie that she did. That was mostly bankrolled by her. And then, I mean, there have been plenty of other instances. Stallone famously funds most of his movies, the Rocky stuff and all that. So I don't know. I guess we just about covered it. That was pretty much our con experience. I mean, we went to a few more panels. There was one on like the cultural impact of horror films, and Laurel really wanted to go to that, so I went with her. We ended up watching the latest Scream movie after that because Laurel wanted to see it really bad. And it's, I guess, just crazy to me that started when I was in high school and it's still going.
Yeah.
And it's still like Nev Campbell and Courtney Cox and like the cast from like those, like they're in it. Even David Arquette, who was like the cop, like he was in it as well. So yeah, I was very surprised. So but it was a really fun time. If you're into comics, I think it's a really great way to get to connect with some of the creative people that you wouldn't normally get to see. And yeah, I would definitely recommend it. So
all right, cool. Well, this has been another after show.
It has been another after show.
Well, thanks for that. And if you would like to comment, please find us on social media at Boneless Comics 1 on Twitter and let Mike know all of your thoughts on this after show.
That's right. Yes.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Comics.